so in chapter 2 it says, here's all the people who were exiles who are going to be able to come back. So again, Babylon is modern Iraq. They're going to come back from, they're going to walk through the desert back to Israel. Gives the names of all the people. We talk about restoring the temple, restoring the altar, and eventually we'll get to the temple. Last week we had the one girl here who asked about the northern tribes. Okay, in chapter 4 it says that they interfered. They're not big into having these people come back and reestablish in Jerusalem. And the reason for that is the north was the anti-king, big government, anti-Jerusalem, saying that we should be able to worship anywhere, not just Jerusalem. So they are not very enthused about Jerusalem being resettled. So it talks about their interference in chapter 4. And if you want to read how they did that. Zerubbabel is going to be the leader pretty much when they come back as far as political leader goes. And it talks even about some later hostility by the north against the south. All right, in chapter 5, it says, all right, now we're back. And people have established their homes. So you got to think, what would it be like? Suppose somebody came in and leveled the city of Mobile. Just destroyed it totally. Nothing left but rubble. And then sent us away to Indiana. All right, and then 50 years later, many of us would be dead, but our children might be alive, and they say, okay, you can go back to Mobile and start over again. Okay, so they come back here and they find everything's pretty much rubble yet. So what do? So I start trying to build a home for themselves and that kind of stuff. So that's what goes on in the first 15 years or so once people get back. And then after a while, chapter 5 says, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah began to prophesy to the Jews and Judah and Jerusalem in the name of God, and they're saying, okay, we've been back for a while. Most of us have our homes built. It's time to get Jerusalem fixed and to get the temple back. And if you want to look, I guess we may as well, if you go to your table of contents and find Haggai and Zechariah. We'll just do Haggai because it's shorter and pretty clear on what was expected there. So this is how we can piece some things together. We know what year it is here, and it says during this time, Haggai and Zechariah taught. And you can see Haggai is just 2 chapters. And it even says at the beginning of Haggai, on the first day of the 6th month in the 2nd year of King Darius. Well, we know when King Darius was king. All right, so he is going to start speaking here. So take a look at Haggai chapter 1, verse 8. This is what it says. This is what God the host says. Go up into the hill country, bring timber, and build the house, that I may take pleasure in it and receive my glory. So what house is that? Temple. So there he's starting to say it's time to rebuild the temple. And then in chapter 2, again the poetic part, verse 3. Who is left among you that saw this house in its former glory? Well, not many of us. Not many of us here were alive 50 years ago. Or now it's been more like 65 years. Right? So maybe nobody. But anyway, this used to be the main building in the city. How do you see it now? Doesn't it seem like nothing? So he said, take courage, it's time to get going. God's brought us back here. We need to fill this house with glory. So yeah, it's time to rebuild the temple. So that's what Haggai talks about. And Zechariah is about that and some other things. But the book of Ezra tells us that Haggai and Zechariah were among the people that say now it's time to rebuild the temple. And we know from history that that's then 520 to 515. They spend 5 years to get that done. Because it's the biggest building in the city. So it's not too bad. But anyway, that is the instruction there to get the temple rebuilt. Chapter 6, Darius is the king of Persia, so it talks about a decree that he makes about the people here. Chapter 7 now is when Ezra is introduced. It says in verse 8, he came to Jerusalem in the 5th month of the 7th year of the king. And there are two different possibilities as far as when that is, because there were two kings that had the same name. So it depends on if he was referring to the first king of that name or the second one. But anyway, Ezra comes, and many people think that he had a lot to do with putting together a lot of the written, what we now call the Old Testament. So it's his story now for a little bit. And now the story's not particularly in the best reading order, chronologically. Chapter 8, and here's a list of the family heads who returned from Babylon during the time of Artaxerxes. So a little bit later, after the first group, there's some more people that are coming home. So they list them. Talks about their trip home. Chapter 9, oh darn it, what are they going to blame a lot of the problems on? Yeah, mixed marriages. Mixed as in they're saying, yep, one of our problems was the first time. Remember what did Solomon get us into trouble by doing? Marrying so many women, many of whom worshiped other gods. The really bad gods, what did they do? Well, the worst ones gave up their faith and followed the religion of the women from other places. So that's what they're denouncing here and say, yeah, we can't do that again. And Ezra says in chapter 9 just how terrible this is. And people respond in chapter 10. And Ezra says, yeah, we have to rectify this. And it's kind of sad. Chapter 10, the last chapter of Ezra, ends with a list of all the people who married foreign women. And the very last line of the book said, all these had taken foreign wives, they sent them away, both the women and their children. So we are going to eliminate any possibility of foreign influences affecting our religion.
That's better than killing them.
Yeah, so yeah, okay, thank you. So they made,
Kind of like death though back then.
see, they made that improvement. Now for the women, yeah, they don't have much for a source of income. That's why what we're going to talk about next week is going to be so important. Really, the significance of what we cover next week, because it's kind of going on at the same time or even earlier than this, which is going to give us kind of countering what we've heard from this. But for Ezra, it's all going to be about ritual purity. Boy, if we want to get back, and we need to be strict in following our way. And the best way to do that is make sure that it's just us, just people who believe in Yahweh. All right, Ezra and Nehemiah, again, historically, they are about the same time. Ezra is the one who puts things in writing. He's the written law. Nehemiah, the guy who gets his name in the second book, is responsible for rebuilding Jerusalem, the city. So anyway, it begins by saying when it is for him. They're wondering what he's sad about. And he says, well, I've heard this report about how Jerusalem still not in good shape. They've rebuilt the temple, but the city itself is still half rubble. So the king says, all right, why don't you go there and oversee the rebuilding of it. So in the middle of chapter 2, it says, circuit of the city. Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem and travels around the city to survey it. And he looks around and says, yes, we have a lot of work to do. And back then, the main thing you have to do to protect the city, to make sure that it doesn't get destroyed again, is rebuild the wall around it. So he says we've got to get going on that. And this is kind of neat. In chapter 3, they list all the workers, many of the workers who are responsible for building it up. So that'd be kind of neat. You could say, yeah, 2,500 years ago, my great they helped rebuild Jerusalem. at the end, the last paragraph of chapter 3 says there were some people around that were opposed to it, not the Jews, but others. So they do have some enemies saying, yeah, you know what, maybe, we don't want a new Jerusalem that's too strong, so maybe we don't want this. That's probably what they're thinking.
Well, they weren't always very good neighbors. Smashing kids' heads, yeah, they probably, they had a few issues.
Yes. I know they didn't do that, but they said, blessed are those who do that.
Yeah, they had that idea.
Yeah. All right, end of chapter 5, Nehemiah is saying, I'm not gaining anything for doing this, I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do here, rebuilding the city. Chapter 6, there's even some plots against him. But by the end of chapter 6, they get the work done. And it says on the 25th day of this month, it had taken 52 days, but there's another place where it says it took 2 years and 4 months, which is more likely, to build the wall all the way around the city. But anyway, either way, Nehemiah is the one who led the work and got it done. And then it says in chapter 7, after we're redone, all right, we started doing this other thing. And then we did a census of the province, and it lists all these people again. These are the inhabitants, the people who came back from exile. So chapter 7 is a list of descendants from various tribes. And now people go and they take, the last sentence of chapter 7 says that all these people, the priests, the Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple slaves, they all took residence in their cities. And we'll see what difference that makes in a little bit. Okay, now the next section says promulgation of the law, chapter 8, Ezra reads the law. Does that remind you of anything from a couple Sundays ago? Yeah, that was the reading in church. Remember where I said Ezra spoke from daybreak till the afternoon. So the city has been rebuilt, the temple's been rebuilt. All right, everybody, you all need to get together. Get together, they build a platform for him, and he reads much of the Old Testament law to them, gives some interpretation, commentary along the way, so it takes several hours. But the whole point of it being, you know our history now. You know what happened, how we used to be in really good shape, but then we declined, and all these terrible things happened. Hey, God is good. God gave us another chance. We're back here again. We get our second chance to live here. We better not screw it up this time. And the way we don't screw it up is listen to these things from the past. So he reads all of it. And just like when Moses gave them the law the first time on Mount Sinai, they all said, yes, yeah, we'll do it. All right, so they do it here again. So in chapter 9, even there's that song in there that talks about the great things God did for them when they left Egypt on the way to the promised land. So in chapter 10, it says, yes, we agree. It even says on a sealed document appear the names of our princes, Levites, and priests, and they list them there. The provisions of the pact. Here's all the things we're going to be true to these commandments. And then they even say, all right, if we want to make Jerusalem an important city again, we're going to have people living there, more than the few that are there. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to have 10% of us live there. We're going to have 10% of us live in Jerusalem. So that was described in chapter 11. They're going to bring 1 man and 10 to reside in Jerusalem, the holy city, while the other 9 would remain in the other cities. The people applauded and agreed. And then I think it even says who the people are that are going to live in Jerusalem. It even says what their jobs are for some of them, like the gatekeepers. And remember, every city has a wall around it now. How do you get in and out? You've got gates on each side, usually one on each side of the city. So sometimes, even in Jesus' time, they're talking about particularly the water gate. It's the gate where they brought water into the city. Okay, the Joppa gate is the gate that that goes to the city of Joppa or whatever. So each gate had a name. So they're getting Jerusalem resettled, and it says who's going to live there, and then it talks about some people who are living in the other cities. Chapter 12, now we're going to talk about who the priests and Levites are. So you see there's a long name list there. Again, Zerubbabel is going to be the political leader for the time. And then in the middle of chapter 12, they're going to dedicate the wall and have a celebration of that. Chapter 13 is going to remind us of the reform of the temple. We need to do it right. Here's some rules to follow for that. Make sure we follow the Sabbath. And again, it concludes with the denunciation of mixed marriages. And his last line is, thus, I cleanse them of all foreign contamination. So each can do their appointed task, and we can get back the way we should have been at the beginning. And hopefully we'll do better in being faithful to God this time. So that is 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra and Nehemiah, so remember that 538 was the end of the exile. They come back. 520 to 515 is the rebuilding of the temple. It's the middle of the 400s when they're rebuilding Jerusalem and getting the wall around it. So we're proceeding well into the 400s by the time Ezra and Nehemiah are finished. The only other historical, what we call the historical books of the Old Testament, will be 1 and 2 Maccabees, which don't take place until a couple centuries later. The Jews don't have them in their Bible. They're called holy books. They're not in the Bible, though, because they say that the books of the Bible should have been finished by about the time of Ezra. So all of the 39 books that are in the Jewish Old Testament, one of the criteria for getting them in there was to say they should have been written by about the time of Ezra. Some of them maybe were borderline, but most of them were done by 400 BC. So we kind of follow the story of Israel here, the historical books. We'll hold off on Maccabees until later because it is a much later period. What we need to do, though, is see once now that you're probably surprised at a lot of these things, especially how they look upon other people. So is that the case in every book of the Bible? So next week, you can probably read 2 books that, especially the first one, you can probably even understand without a whole lot of interpretation. Anyway, because next week, the 2 main books we're going to do, neither one of them is very long, but they're Ruth and Jonah. So if you take a look at your table of contents, you can find out where they are. All right, now you will notice Ruth is toward the beginning. As a matter of fact, it's right after Judges and before 1 Samuel. Okay, not because it's written there, but because that's the setting for it. Okay, it's a story that takes place way back during the time of the Judges. So we're talking about 1200 BC. It's the setting for the story. Historical accuracy, if it's not true, well, it certainly could be. And, well, the purpose behind it is obviously true. So that is why Ruth is an important book to follow up what we've talked about in recent weeks. And the other is Jonah, which is written a little later on. But you'll notice, well, let's look at both. Let's take a quick look at Ruth and Jonah as far as how long they are. And then you'll see why I said you can read them for next week if you want.
4 chapters for you.
Yes.
Jonah's the same?
Yeah. So the reason that I tell you that you can understand Ruth is you can probably read that book and say, yeah, you know what that makes for it. I understand what that's about. All right? And when I used to teach that in high school, especially a lot of the girls that didn't like violence at the end of the semester, I'd say, what was your favorite book and why? A lot of them, Ruth was probably the favorite book for a lot of people. All right, but that's a simple story there. And then take a look at how long is Jonah.
spit him out.
Yeah. So you'll notice that also is 4 chapters, so that's easy to read. However, definitely most misunderstood book, because if you ask most people about the book of Jonah, what's about, which I'll start with next week. Or I mean, yes. So I mean, when you think of Jonah, what do you think of? Okay, the whale, what else? What's the purpose of it?
Isn't it a prefiguring of Jesus in the tomb?
Something, yeah.
What I've heard.
That's one thing that Christians add to it, yes.
You're supposed to go to that city and tell them to repent.
Supposed to go there and repent, he didn't want to,
Stay in the city.
so then that's,
Las Vegas?
Nineveh, yeah. Supposed to go to Nineveh. Yeah. What was Nineveh?
A city in Iraq, isn't it?
Not only that, it was the capital of Assyria, the country that destroyed the north. Okay, so that's the first thing. So Ruth, the setting is back a long time during the time of the judges. There's no government or anything yet.
It's still a city today, isn't it? Nineveh's
No.
still-
No, it's destroyed. And that one, it says, that still hasn't been rebuilt.
Okay.
Okay, Nineveh, so that's the first thing you need to know. I mean, Jonah makes no sense if you don't know where he's going. He's going to Nineveh. Why? That's why he doesn't want to go there. Why would I want to go
Kill me.
to the capital city of an enemy that I hate? As a matter of fact, if God's got something bad to say, I hope he does destroy him. I don't like Nineveh. Okay, so yeah, no, that's the setting of the story. And the second thing, everything you said, it's all done after a chapter and a half. So if I told you to tell me a story, would you stop less than halfway through? Well, that's what everybody does when they do Jonah. They only do less than half the story. And it's a short story, it's only 4 chapters. So you don't know what the meaning of Jonah is until you read all 4 chapters, and you might not know that one at the end. I'll help you with that next time. But it's one of the most important stories. Jesus liked it anyway, and certainly would have did like Ruth as well. So 2 short stories, but the commentary on them will be easier. And then when we're done with those, I think what I'll do is I'll go through some of the prophets. You said, was there anybody saying anything contrary to what these authors are saying? Yes. Was there anybody saying anything relating to God? Yes, that's the prophets. So we'll do Ruth and Jonah, and then whatever time is left, I'll pick out parts of prophets about what they're saying, why God isn't happy with us. Just so far, all we've heard is God isn't happy with us because we're allowing toleration of other gods instead of ours. That's pretty much all we've heard about God not being happy with. Prophets are going to tell us other things that we can relate to today that God isn't happy with, and that leads to the downfall of the country. So that'll be the second part. Ruth, meaning of Ruth. Jonah, meaning of Jonah, and then some things about the prophets for next time.